Autumn 2005, in the quiet suburb of Upper Arlington, northwest Columbus, Franklin County. White painted wooden houses lined up neatly, each separated by low fences and carefully trimmed lawns. From the main road, the sunset poured through rows of maples blazing red and orange, casting a warm glow into the Lee family's windows. Anna Lee, a 28-year-old Chinese immigrant, stood in the bright-tiled kitchen. On the stove, a pot of soup simmered gently, sending up the soft scent of ginger. She stirred it absent-mindedly, the ceiling's yellow light catching the thin sheen of sweat on her brow. Though she still sometimes felt the ache of leaving her homeland to follow her husband to Ohio, Anna had built a careful rhythm here, keeping family rituals intact as her way of holding everything together. At the small dining table near the sliding door that looked out onto the backyard, 5-year-old Ava sat coloring. Her black hair was tied loosely to one side, her cheeks glowing in the lamplight. Crayons of every shade, red, green, purple, blue, were scattered across the table, some rolling off toward the floor. Ava hummed a tune from a TV jingle, head tilted, her little fingers pressing color into the page. Anna glanced over and smiled. David Lee, 31, worked long shifts as a maintenance technician. Hot-tempered yet devoted, he wasn't home yet, though normally his truck engine would already be growling into the driveway by this hour. Anna glanced at the clock, expecting he'd walk through the door any minute, ready for dinner. She turned back toward the stove, reached for a ladle from the cupboard. 90 seconds passed. No more. The sound of Ava's crayon scratching paper still lingered in her head when Anna turned back again, only to find the chair empty. "Ava," she called softly, uncertain. Silence. The sliding door behind the chair was still locked tight. The kitchen had gone still, except for the quiet bubbling of soup on the stove. One crayon had rolled onto the wooden floor, lying on its side. Anna's heart skipped. She called again, louder now, running toward the hallway, opening doors, peering under the table, into corners, her voice rising in pitch with each unanswered call. Only a minute ago, Ava had been there, her tiny fingers stained green with wax. Now the empty chair stood like a wound in the room, proof of something unthinkable. In that instant, the calm veneer of Upper Arlington cracked apart. A chill crept up Anna's spine, sharp and merciless. Her daughter had vanished, not from the park, not from a busy street, but from within the safe, warm walls of their own home. Anna's voice tore through the house, echoing down the hallway, bouncing off the plaster walls. "Ava! Ava, where are you?" Her throat caught, but she forced the words louder as she threw open doors, peered into closets, crouched to look beneath the bed. The house answered her with silence. The front door banged open. David had come home. His boots clattered against the hardwood as he took in his wife's panic-stricken face. "What happened?" he barked. "She was just here, by the table. Then she was gone." Anna's words came out in fragments, strangled by terror. David didn't waste another second. He stormed through the rooms, yanking open drawers, tugging at closet doors until they rattled, dropping to his knees to sweep his arms under the beds. "Ava!" he shouted, his voice deep and booming, as if volume alone might summon their daughter back. But the house was empty, as though it had swallowed the child whole. A sharp knock at the door made Anna flinch. Standing there was Marjorie, the woman from next door. She was in her early 50s, gray curls tucked neatly under a scarf, her sweater patterned with small roses. She had lived in the same house for more than 2 decades, long enough that the neighbors had stopped noticing how solitary she was. Widowed young, with no children of her own, Marjorie poured her time into her immaculate garden and her kitchen. Every spring she cut roses to leave in glass jars on porches. Every holiday she arrived at the Lees' door with cookies or pie, never asking for more than a smile in return. Ava especially adored her lemon squares. Now she stepped across the threshold, carrying a folded kitchen towel and a bottle of water, as if she had known exactly what was needed. Her face was soft with concern. "Anna, dear," Marjorie murmured, placing the towel into Anna's trembling hands. "Don't blame yourself. Children wander. She'll turn up. She slipped an arm gently around Anna's shoulders, guiding her toward a chair. The warmth in her voice was steady, like a lullaby meant to hold panic at bay. To anyone watching, she was the image of neighborly comfort. Before Anna could reply, the low, guttural roar of a Harley motorcycle shattered the night. Headlights slashed across the curtains, then died abruptly as the bike skidded to a halt outside. The door burst open again. Evan Riker filled the frame. In his 40s, he was tall and broad, his denim vest hanging open over tattooed arms, the faint smell of gasoline clinging to him. His hair was slicked back, his eyes sharp under heavy brows, his jaw shadowed by stubble. Evan had once served 5 years in the Army, something he mentioned rarely and without nostalgia. Since returning, he lived alone in the cluttered house 2 doors down, his garage perpetually spilling with spare motorcycle parts, oil cans, and the hulking shape of a white van that seemed never to move. He was known for being rough-edged, a man who drank too much, spoke too loudly, and carried his own code of loyalty. Some of the neighbors found him decent enough when sober, others crossed the street to avoid him. David had once gotten into a shouting match with him over a property line dispute, and his offhand jabs about foreigners crowding the block hadn't made him many friends. "What the hell's going on here?" Evan demanded now, his voice booming, abrasive. David whirled on him, fists clenched. "Why are you here?" "I heard shouting," Evan shot back, stepping inside uninvited. Half the block must have heard. His gaze darted around the living room, then to Anna. "Where's the kid?" Anna recoiled from his tone. His presence, heavy and intrusive, seemed to charge the air with suspicion. Rough as he was, standing there at the very moment Ava had vanished, he looked less like a neighbor and more like a threat. A quieter voice broke the tension. "Let me check something." From across the street, Mrs. Cho had appeared, still wearing her laundromat apron. She was in her 40s, calm and methodical by nature, known in the neighborhood for her no-nonsense efficiency. She and her husband ran the small laundry shop near Lane Avenue, where most of the cul-de-sac dropped off their clothes. Anna had leaned on her kindness more than once. When Ava was sick and she needed someone to watch the girl for an hour, Mrs. Cho had stepped in without hesitation. She was the sort of neighbor who noticed everything. Packages left too long on a porch, kids skipping school, stray cats circling the bins. Her home cameras had helped the police once before when a string of windows were smashed on the block. Now she cradled a small monitor in her arms. "The security camera on my shop might have caught something," she explained, her voice steady. They crowded around as grainy footage flickered to life. The Lee driveway came into view, the edge of the porch, and then nothing. The camera's blind spot swallowed the very spot where Ava had been. But a figure did appear. Evan, striding past on his Harley, then stopping right in front of the lease's gate. He crouched briefly, fiddling with something near his boot, tying a lace, perhaps, or checking his gear. To the screen, it looked like he lingered there, deliberately. "That's not—" Evan started, but the words caught in his throat as everyone else stared at the frozen image. The biker, the tattoos, the broad back bent toward the Lee house. A silence heavier than steel settled over the room. In that single frame, suspicion had found its first face. By the time the first squad car pulled up, the quiet cul-de-sac no longer felt like home. Red and blue lights spun across the trimmed lawns and white fences, staining the neighborhood in restless color. Another cruiser rolled in behind it, then a Franklin County Sheriff's vehicle, its radio crackling with clipped commands. Uniformed officers fanned out immediately, flashlights slicing through the dark. One crouched by the storm drain at the curb, running a beam down into the glistening grate. Others vaulted the small fence into the Lee backyard, sweeping the grass for footprints, rattling the latches on the garden gate. A canine handler unclipped a German shepherd that strained forward, nose pressed to the ground, circling, then pulling toward the park at the end of the street. But there was nothing. No trail, no broken latch, no scuff mark in the soil. It was as if the child had evaporated into the autumn night. Neighbors had gathered in clusters on the sidewalks, pulled from dinner tables and living rooms, murmuring to each other under the restless lights. Children were ushered back indoors, doors shut quickly behind them. The adults stayed, their faces pale, whispers sharp as needles. Eyes kept flicking toward the same figure. Evan Riker stood apart near his driveway, arms crossed, leather vest dark in the flashing lights. His old white van loomed behind him, streaked with rust, its rear doors chained loosely shut. He squinted at the commotion, jaw tight, the heel of his boot grinding against the concrete. "Why is he just standing there?" someone muttered near the curb. "I saw him by their porch earlier," another voice whispered. "That van of his, God knows what he keeps in there." Evan heard the words. His fists clenched at his sides. Then he barked back across the yard, his voice like gravel. "I didn't do a damn thing!" The outburst drew more looks than it deflected. One officer started toward him, hand on his belt. Evan threw up his arms. "Search the van if you want. You'll find tools and oil, that's it." He slapped the side panel with the flat of his palm, the metal ringing out like a warning bell. "But stop staring at me like I'm some monster." His defensiveness only deepened the suspicion. A neighbor shook his head. "That's exactly what a guilty man would say." David glared at him from the porch, his anger simmering just under the surface, ready to boil. The old property line argument replayed itself in every neighbor's mind, each harsh word now recast as evidence of something darker. And yet, inside the living room, Anna sat frozen on the couch, Marjorie beside her. The older woman's hand rested gently over Anna's, her thumb stroking the back of her knuckles in a steady rhythm. "Don't lose hope, dear," Marjorie whispered. Her voice was calm, resolute, the only stillness in a house vibrating with chaos. "Children are resilient. Ava will be found." Anna nodded mutely, eyes swollen from tears, while outside suspicion tightened like a noose around Evan's neck. Another officer stepped into the Liza's home, clipboard in hand, walking a slow circle through the living room. He paused at the hallway closet, tugging once at the door. The edge of the wooden frame caught against the floor, leaving a faint scratch where it had rubbed many times before. He frowned, pressed the door back into place, then scribbled a note and moved on, never looking closer. A clue, waiting in plain sight, ignored. Outside, radios crackled again. Nothing in the sewer lines, nothing in the park, nothing by the fences. The dog whined, circling back, nose confused. The search was coming up empty. The neighborhood, once a portrait of suburban calm, now bristled with suspicion. Parents clutched their children tighter. Strangers looked like threats. And through it all, Evan Riker stood under the spinning lights, defiant, scowling, a man who seemed born to be blamed. Anna barely noticed. Her gaze was locked on the front door, as if Ava might simply walk back through it at any second. Marjorie tightened her hand over hers. "You are not alone in this," she said softly. But Anna's eyes were hollow, her heart hammering against the silence that returned every time she called her daughter's name. The cul-de-sac was no longer quiet. Police cruisers idled with lights spinning, painting the white fences and trimmed hedges in garish red and blue. Neighbors clustered in small knots, their voices dropping to uneasy murmurs that carried in the cool night air. Porch lights glowed up and down the street, a row of suburban watchtowers in a neighborhood that had always prided itself on safety. An officer stood before the gathered residents, clipboard in hand, voice clipped. "We have reason to believe the child may have been taken outside the neighborhood," he said. "We'll expand the search perimeter immediately." The words landed like stones. Until now, everyone had clung to the fragile hope that Ava was hiding in a closet, crouched beneath a bush, playing some elaborate game. Taken outside the cul-de-sac meant the fear was bigger, the danger faceless and beyond reach. Anna sat hunched on the curb, hands knotted in her lap, her face pale under the strobing lights. Beside her, Marjorie knelt with quiet persistence. The older woman draped a shawl across Anna's shoulders, fingers lingering as if to anchor her to the earth. "Your girl will come back," Marjorie whispered. her voice low. Soothing. Children find their way home. You'll see. To the crowd, it looked like compassion embodied. Kindness personified in a neighbor who never failed to bring comfort. Across the street, Evan Riker stood by his Harley, arms tense. The gossiping voices pricked at him like thorns. He yanked open the motorcycle's saddlebag, rummaging through tools, then slammed it shut with a metallic crack that made heads turn. "I didn't take her!" he barked, his voice echoing across the circle. "Quit looking at me like that!" The reaction was immediate. Mothers drawing children closer, men exchanging uneasy looks. Evan kicked at a patch of gravel, jaw tight, then mounted the Harley in a single swing. He gunned the engine once, a roar that drowned every whisper, then tore off down the street, leaving the crowd in vibrating silence. Mrs. Cho, standing near the curb with her arms folded, let out a soft sigh. "The cameras still don't show her," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "There's always that blind spot." Her words carried a weight of resignation, as if technology itself had betrayed them. Above it all, the neighborhood remained outwardly pristine. White fences straight as rulers, lawns clipped to perfection, porch swings creaking softly in the breeze. Yet the picture of suburban security was fractured now, like a postcard bent at its corners. Behind those fences a child had vanished, and for the first time, every resident felt it in their bones. Even here, in the safest of places, danger had found a way in. It was a Saturday evening in Westerville when the call came in. A woman, leaving the supermarket with her 2 kids, swore she had seen a little girl who looked exactly like the missing Ava Lee. The child was climbing into a white van, the kind of van that had already haunted the Lee's nightmares for years. By the time police arrived, the parking lot was buzzing with rumors. Strangers leaned against their carts, whispering, eyes darting toward the van now cordoned off by flashing cruisers. Anna and David had raced to the scene as soon as the call reached them, hearts pounding as if the 15 miles from Upper Arlington to Westerville were a corridor to salvation. Anna clutched David's sleeve as they pushed through the small crowd. "It could be her," she whispered, voice raw with desperate hope. It could really be her. The van was boxy and plain, its paint dulled by years of sun. A couple of officers moved around it with flashlights, peering through the windows. The back doors swung open under their hands. Inside lay nothing but tools, grease-stained rags, and a couple of rusted gas cans. No toys, no clothes, no sign of a child. "Whose van is this?" David demanded, his voice breaking. The answer came in a roar of exhaust as another vehicle pulled up. Evan Riker's Harley, its guttural engine silencing the crowd. He dismounted in a swing of denim and leather, eyes flashing at the cluster of uniforms. "You've got to be kidding me," he barked. "Again?" "Mr. Riker," one officer said stiffly, "we need you to answer a few questions." Evan spread his tattooed arms, exasperation radiating from him. "Look at the damn thing! Search it top to bottom! I don't care!" Anna's heart hammered as she stepped closer, scanning his face, his movements. For a split second she saw it. The possibility. Evan lived only 2 doors down. He had the van. He had the temper. Could it have been him all along? The woman who'd called it in, frazzled, clutching a toddler on her hip, spoke up, pointing a trembling finger. "I swear it was her. The little girl had dark hair, same cut as the posters. She was holding a coloring book. I saw her get in." Another bystander nodded in agreement. "She looked scared. That's what I thought." David's fists tightened until his knuckles blanched. "Where is she, Riker?" Evan spun toward him, eyes wide with fury. "I don't have your kid, David. Jesus Christ, how many times do I have to say it?" He kicked at the asphalt, sending pebbles scattering. "I was here picking up oil for the bike. That's it. The girl they saw wasn't Ava. You're seeing ghosts." An officer reemerged from the van, shaking his head. "Empty. No child here. No evidence of one either." Anna felt her knees weaken, the swell of hope crashing down in her chest. She pressed a hand to her mouth to keep from sobbing. David stared blankly into the van, jaw clenched, the fight draining out of him. Evan cursed under his breath, raking a hand through his slicked hair. "I'm sick of being your scapegoat," he spat. "Every time someone thinks they see a ghost in a van, you drag me out like I'm some monster." His voice cracked with a rawness that was half anger, half exhaustion. But the crowd didn't hear the crack. They only saw the anger. Mothers pulled their children closer. Men muttered under their breath. And Anna, even through her grief, couldn't shake the image of him leaning against that van, the harsh set of his jaw, the way he seemed to stand on the fault line between rage and guilt. The officers let him go after a formal warning. Evan swung back onto his Harley, the engine screaming as he tore out of the lot, leaving a trail of suspicion in his wake. In the sudden quiet, Anna stood trembling. "It could have been her," she whispered, the words fading in the night air. David's arm slipped around her shoulders, pulling her close, but his eyes stayed fixed on the van as if staring into its hollow shell long enough might conjure a trace of his daughter. There was nothing. Only empty metal and the echo of what might have been. The hope that had burned so bright minutes before guttered out, leaving them in deeper darkness than before. And still behind them, whispers lingered. Evan's name carried like smoke, thick and suffocating, drifting back toward Upper Arlington. The sun was bleeding out behind the rooftops, leaving the cul-de-sac bathed in that dim, uncertain light when shadows sharpen but colors fade. The Leas backyard, once the place of birthday balloons and sprinkler games, had grown silent and heavy with absence. Anna stood there with David at her side, both of them staring at Mrs. Cho, who had set a small laptop on the picnic table. Mrs. Cho was practical, measured. Everyone trusted her word. She was the woman who ran the laundromat, who ironed shirts with crisp creases, who had once helped catch a teenage vandal with her shop cameras. If there was anyone who could bring clarity to this nightmare, it was her. She pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose and plugged in a small external drive. "I've gone back through the date of the disappearance," she explained. "This camera here faces the alley behind our houses. It's not perfect, but—" Her tone carried a weight of responsibility, as if she hoped technology could do what human eyes and memories had failed to. The footage appeared grainy on the screen, colors distorted in the fading light. They watched the Leas fence line flicker into view, white slats blurring against the dusky sky. Nothing moved at first. The backyard looked still, lifeless. Anna leaned in, holding her breath as if a single sound might scare the pixels away. David folded his arms tight, jaw set. "There," Mrs. Cho murmured, pausing the feed. "Do you see that?" A faint blur crossed the corner of the frame, so close to the fence it nearly vanished into the shadow. Mrs. Cho reversed the footage, slowed it down. The blur sharpened into the suggestion of a figure, a sleeve, an arm moving swiftly past. David swore under his breath. Someone was there. Someone was right at our fence. Anna's hand trembled as she pointed to the screen. "Go back. Can you zoom in?" Mrs. Cho hesitated, then tapped at the keyboard. The image pixelated further, breaking into squares of light and shadow. And yet, one detail stood out with surprising clarity. A patch of fabric brushing the edge of the fence. A sleeve patterned in faded floral. "It's a cardigan," Anna whispered. "A woman's arm." The three of them stared at the frozen frame. The fabric seemed almost delicate against the rough wood of the fence. Pale, dotted with blossoms, like something pulled from an older wardrobe. David's voice was rough with urgency. "Whose is it? Do we know anyone who wears that?" Mrs. Cho shook her head. "Cardigans are common. Half the women at church wear something like this. Don't jump to conclusions." But the seed had been planted. Anna's mind searched faces, closets, neighborhood barbecues. She saw Marjorie next door, leaning over her garden hedge, always in neat sweaters. She remembered the floral prints, pinks, blues, greens. For a heartbeat, suspicion flickered. Then she shoved it down. Marjorie had been kind, endlessly kind. She was the one who had sat with her when sleep wouldn't come, who had brought cookies for Ava's birthday. To suspect her now felt like betrayal. "It could be anyone," Anna said quickly, almost to reassure herself. Anyone passing through. A delivery person. A stranger cutting across the yard. David didn't look convinced. His eyes stayed locked on the blurred image, jaw grinding. Somebody was right there, at our fence. That's no coincidence. Mrs. Cho closed the laptop gently, as if shutting the lid might close off the unease spreading among them. I'll give the footage to the police. Maybe their techs can clarify it better. For now, it's just a shadow. Don't put too much faith in it. But Anna couldn't let it go. As the night deepened and the porch lights clicked on across the street, she kept seeing that sleeve in her mind. The floral pattern brushing past the fence at the very moment her daughter had vanished. A fragile thread of possibility. Faint but undeniable. For a fleeting moment she felt hope bloom again. This was proof that someone had been there. Proof that Ava hadn't simply evaporated. Yet beneath the hope was something colder. Sharper. Whoever wore that cardigan had been within feet of her child. And that thought dug into her chest like a thorn. When they finally walked back inside, Anna lingered at the window, staring at the neighboring yards. So many fences, so many hedges, so many lives intertwined yet unknowable. She told herself it was nothing, just another dead end. But the image of the floral sleeve lingered, a specter in her memory. It was a clue she would not understand until much later, when the truth came crashing down. That the gentle arm in the cardigan had never been a stranger's at all. The night was restless. Wind rattled the trees along the cul-de-sac, scattering brittle leaves across the lawns. From inside the Lee house came the steady creak of the side gate, swinging open and shut in the gusts. Anna noticed it when she went to draw the curtains, the faint metallic groan that didn't belong. She stepped outside, her sweater pulled tight against the chill. The gate that should have been latched now sagged half open, its hinges squealing. For a heartbeat, she thought maybe David had left it unhooked. But then she saw the scrap of paper flapping against the slats, taped down at the corners with rough strips of masking tape. Her breath hitched. The note was crude, letters cut from a magazine or newspaper and glued in uneven rows. They spelled out 2 words in ransom note fashion. Check the park. Anna's hands shook as she tore it free. The paper crinkled, the tape snapping like brittle bones. She stared at the letters, her pulse racing. Somebody had been here. Someone close enough to touch their gate, to leave instructions. It was terrifying, yes, but also hope. A cruel, intoxicating flicker of it. "David!" she shouted, her voice carried off by the wind. He came from the living room, frowning at her urgency. She thrust the note into his hand, his brows knit, his eyes narrowing on the blocky ransom-style words. "Who put this here?" His tone was half growl, half plea. Anna's eyes brimmed. "It means she's alive. Someone knows where Ava is." Within minutes, flashing red and blue lit up the street. Patrol cars lined the curb, radios buzzing. Officers swept through the yard, photographing the gate, bagging the note in a plastic sleeve. Anna hovered, desperate for them to move faster. The search shifted quickly to the park 3 blocks away, the largest patch of green in Upper Arlington. Cruisers roared ahead, beams of light cutting through the trees. David insisted on going, Anna clinging to his arm as they followed the convoy. The park loomed dark, its playground equipment warped into strange silhouettes. Swing sets swayed in the wind. The slides gleamed dully under spotlights. Officers fanned out, dogs straining at their leashes, barking at shadows. The sweep lights crossed the grass in rhythmic arcs, like lighthouses sweeping an empty sea. Anna's chest ached with each second. Her eyes darted everywhere, searching for movement. A small figure crouched behind a tree, a flash of familiar hair. Each shadow became her daughter, each rustling bush a sign. "Spread wider," one officer barked. The dogs sniffed at the bases of trees, their handlers murmuring encouragement. A team scoured the creek bed, water glinting under flashlight beams. Others pushed through the brush at the park's edge. "Anything?" David demanded, voice raw. Shakes of heads, negative signals. Radios crackled with silence. Anna clung to the note in her memory. Someone had written those words. They had to mean something. Hours bled away in the cold. One by one, the officers regrouped in the parking lot. No footprints, no dropped belongings, no sign of a child. The park was empty, but for the echoes of their shouting and the smell of churned-up earth. Anna sank onto a bench, her arms wrapped around herself. Her teeth chattered, not from the wind, but from the collapse of hope. She had let herself believe. For a few hours she had thought maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was ending. David slammed his fist against a lamppost. "Someone's screwing with us," he spat. His voice carried sharp across the empty lot. "Wasting our time, wasting the cops' time, and every minute she's further away." An officer crouched in front of Anna, his expression gentle. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. There's nothing here. We'll keep the note as evidence, see if forensics turns up anything. But it might be a hoax." She shook her head violently. "No. Someone came to our gate. Someone wanted us to go there. You don't do that if you don't know something." But even as she said it, the weight of futility pressed down. The police were dispersing, radios dimming. The dogs were being loaded back into vans. The hope that had spiked so high now burned to ash in her chest. When they returned home just before dawn, the cul-de-sac was quiet again. The side gate still swung faintly in the breeze, stripped of its message. Anna stared at the wood where the note had hung, imagining unseen hands pressing tape against it, unseen eyes watching their reaction. Somebody had walked right up to their house. Somebody had played with their hope. She turned away, hollow. Behind her, the gate creaked shut in the wind, and the silence of the suburb pressed back in. The playground sat at the corner of Tremont Road, a small patch of swings and slides where neighborhood kids gathered on weekends. That Saturday morning, the air carried the shrieks of laughter, the squeak of swing chains, the clatter of bicycles dumped against the curb. Parents leaned on benches, trading stories while their children raced across the mulch. It was here, amid the ordinary bustle, that a rumor was born. A man in his 60s, walking his terrier past the park, froze as he caught sight of a broad-shouldered figure in a denim vest. Evan Riker, unmistakable with his tattoos and heavy boots, was bent beside a little girl in a pink dress. From the distance, it looked like he was gripping her wrist firmly, tugging her toward the street. By the time the man reached the end of the block, the story had already crystallized in his head. Evan Riker was leading away a girl who looked like Ava Lee. The police were called within the hour. When officers arrived, they found Evan exactly where he had been, crouched beside a pair of neighborhood kids, tightening the chain on a wobbly bicycle. Grease streaked his hands. The little girl in the pink dress was not Ava at all, but Leah Martinez from 2 doors down, grinning proudly as Evan gave the wheel a final spin. Still, the witness stood firm. "I know what I saw," he insisted, voice quavering with indignation. He had her by the hand. She was struggling. His terrier yapped at his feet as though echoing the accusation. The officers took statements, checked IDs, confirmed with Leah's mother that Evan had indeed been helping the kids fix their bikes. Nothing suggested foul play. On paper, it was a misunderstanding. But the damage had already been done. News spread fast through the cul-de-sac. By evening, whispers curled like smoke through the neighborhood. He was seen dragging a girl. Didn't they say it was the same age as Ava? You know about that van he keeps parked out front? Anna heard the murmurs from her porch. Each word felt like a stone on her chest. She wanted to shout that it wasn't proof, that she needed something more real than rumor. Yet part of her, the part desperate for answers, clung to the possibility. David, meanwhile, seethed. "They'll hound him until he breaks," he muttered, pacing the living room. And what if he's innocent? We're chasing ghosts while Ava's still out there. Evan himself made no effort to soften his image. When reporters cornered him outside his garage, he snapped. "I didn't touch that girl," he roared, shoving past cameras. "You people won't leave me the hell alone." He kicked a trash can into the gutter, metal ringing down the block. The clip ran that night on local news, stripped of context. A furious biker shouting, Muscles tensed, trash can rolling into the street. To viewers, it looked like rage uncoiling in the guilty. For the police, the incident swelled the case file another inch. More interviews, more pages of statements, more wasted hours. Each false lead diverted resources from other angles, but once suspicion attached itself to Evan, it clung like oil to water. Anna tried to push the image of him from her mind. The crouched figure. The girl in pink. The whispers that filled the spaces of her grief. But when she lay awake that night, she couldn't stop replaying the grainy mental picture the witness had painted. Evan's rough hand closing around a small wrist. It wasn't Ava. She knew that now. The police knew it. But doubt has a way of living longer than certainty. And with every misstep, every false accusation, the search for her daughter drifted further from where the truth lay. Inches away, behind walls no one thought to touch. 7 years had carved themselves into the Lee household like scars that refused to fade. The white clapboard siding had yellowed, the porch railings chipped and splintered. Inside, the air felt heavier, pressed down by silence. The house, once filled with the scatter of toys and Ava's shrieks of laughter, had become a mausoleum of stillness. David sat on the sofa that evening, shoulders hunched, a half-empty beer sweating on the coffee table. He watched the rain streak the windows, tapping in uneven rhythms. Anna sat across from him, her lap filled with photo albums, her fingers brushing the smiling face of a 5-year-old frozen in glossy paper. "We can't keep doing this," David said suddenly, his voice a low growl. Anna looked up, startled. "Doing what?" "Living here, in this tomb." His jaw clenched. "Every time I open the door, I see what's not here. Her crayons, her chair, her voice. It's killing me, Anna. We need to sell this house." Her eyes hardened. Sell it? And where would Ava come home to? What if she finds her way back and we're gone? "She won't," he snapped, then winced as if the words themselves cut him. "It's been 7 years. Do you know the odds?" "I don't care about odds," Anna shot back. "I care about her. If she walks to this door and strangers live here, what then?" The fight cracked open like a dam, each word spilling the frustration that had simmered for years. David paced the room, rubbing the back of his neck. Anna's hands trembled over the photo album. A knock broke the tension. Marjorie, umbrella dripping, appeared at the doorway. Her curls framed her face in soft gray. She carried a plate of muffins, still warm enough to fog the foil. "I heard voices," she said gently. "Thought you could use something sweet." David turned away, muttering under his breath. Anna welcomed her in. Marjorie sat beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Don't let grief take your home. If your girl remembers the way back, she'll come here. This is where she belongs." Anna's throat tightened, gratitude mingling with exhaustion. David, silent now, disappeared upstairs, leaving his wife with the neighbor's soft words and cinnamon-sweet comfort. Later that night, Anna carried the vacuum into Ava's old room. Dust coated the dresser. The dollhouse sat unopened. She worked slowly, as though the objects might break. When the vacuum couldn't reach behind the heavy built-in wardrobe, she tugged it forward. The wood legs scraped across the floor with a harsh, grating sound. Anna crouched, frowning at the faint groove etched into the hardwood. For a moment she hesitated, fingertips tracing the shallow track. Had the wardrobe shifted before? It felt odd, but the thought passed. Old houses creaked, wood warped. She pushed the wardrobe back flush against the wall and returned to her cleaning. The hum of the vacuum drowned out the uneasy silence. She didn't notice the faint draft that slipped up from beneath. 3 years later, the house still stood. 10 years since Ava's disappearance, and time had dulled nothing except the brightness of the posters in town. The edges curled, the ink faded to gray, but Anna's resolve remained the same. It was another rainy evening when she sat in the living room, the lamplight dim against the storm outside. She held one of Ava's old books, its pages worn soft from tiny hands. Then she caught it, a sharp tang in the air, chemical and clean. Her brow furrowed. She lifted her head, sniffing again. Bleach. Setting the book aside, Anna rose and moved toward the window. Rain lashed the glass, wind driving cold drafts into the room. She peered out across the yards. Perhaps it was Mrs. Cho, scrubbing her concrete steps again. The laundromat always smelled faintly of disinfectant, or maybe the storm had carried the smell from some gutter runoff. But something didn't add up. The wind blew in the opposite direction, away from the Cho house. The odor seemed to come from beneath her, from the very floorboards under her slippers. She froze in the dim light, heart ticking faster. For a moment, she imagined there was something beneath the house, something hidden. The thought frightened her enough to shake her head quickly, as if rejecting it outright. She whispered to herself, "It's just the rain. Just chemicals washing down the street." Anna shut the curtains firmly and returned to the couch, though the bleach tang still lingered in her nostrils. She pressed her palms together, forcing herself back into the routine of waiting, of surviving. Downstairs in the quiet, the smell of bleach dissipated into the night air. But the boards beneath her feet held their secret, and the rain continued to drum against the roof of the Lee home, steady, unyielding. The rain had barely dried from the night before when Anna noticed something strange along the back fence. The grass was still damp, glistening with beads of water, and the boards of the white fence gleamed in the morning sun. There, snagged low against a splintered edge, was a child's ribbon, faded pink, its fabric frayed, the elastic stretched thin. Anna's chest tightened. Her hands trembled as she pulled it free. It was the kind of ribbon Ava used to wear years ago, tied into her hair before preschool. Her breath came fast. "David!" she called, her voice cracking. Within an hour, officers were in the yard, plastic gloves snapping as they bagged the ribbon. Neighbors gathered again, the buzz of speculation rippling through the cul-de-sac. And as always, their eyes slid toward Evan Riker. He was already outside, leaning against his white van, arms folded. His jaw twitched as the murmurs grew. An officer crossed to him. "Mind explaining why a child's hair ribbon shows up where you park?" Evan's voice was raw, strained. "I don't know. I've never seen that damn thing before." But his protests fell heavy and hollow. His denim vest was damp from the morning mist, his tattoos stark against his pale skin. The image of him looming near the Lisa's home, caught on Mrs. Cho's camera years ago, still haunted the collective memory. Now the ribbon seemed like confirmation, the missing piece in the puzzle everyone had been trying to force together. Anna's heart pounded with a desperate rhythm. Could it be real this time? Had Ava been here, so close, so recently? For one flickering instant, hope sparked, and then dimmed again as procedure took over. The ribbon was tested, handled, discussed. Days later, the results came back. No usable DNA, no proof of origin. Just another thread leading nowhere. Anna sagged into her chair when she heard. The small, trembling hope she had clutched that morning dissolved into ash. Evan, meanwhile, exploded. He cursed in the middle of the cul-de-sac, fists slamming against the hood of his van. "How many times are you going to drag me through this circus?" he roared. His anger frightened some, confirmed suspicions for others. To the police and the neighbors, his temper was just another nail in the coffin of his reputation. But once again, there was no evidence. The ribbon, like every other lead, evaporated into nothing. And yet suspicion clung to Evan like oil. Thick, unshakable. Years blurred after that, the days bleeding into one another. The neighborhood that had once been galvanized by Ava's disappearance began to grow quiet. The flyers taped to telephone poles turned brittle, their ink washed pale by sun and rain. New children played in the cul-de-sac, their laughter replacing the hushed prayers of the past. In the Lee house, however, time stood still. Ava's toys remained boxed in the corner of her bedroom, covered by a thin veil of dust. Her small shoes, once lined neatly by the door, were tucked away in a box but never thrown out. Anna would sometimes lift the lid and stroke the worn fabric, her eyes blurring until the shoes doubled in her sight. David retreated into silence. He worked longer hours, came home later, spoke less. His presence at the dinner table became that of a shadow, silent, hunched, existing rather than living. When arguments sparked between him and Anna, they ended not in shouting, but in a suffocating stillness, each retreating into their own corners of grief. Neighbors, too, had grown distant. The Lees had become a reminder of something unsolvable, an open wound the community wanted to forget. People stopped knocking on their door with casseroles. The police stopped making routine checks unless called. Even Mrs. Cho, once diligent about sharing every scrap of security footage, spoke less of the case. One by one, the world moved on. Only Anna refused to. She still cleaned Ava's room, still polished the picture frames, still pressed her ear to the silence of the house as though waiting to hear her daughter's footsteps. And all the while, beneath her feet, the truth remained hidden. The ribbon by the fence, the bleach in the air, the scrape of the wardrobe, they were all fragments of a puzzle nobody fit together. No one thought to look inside the house itself. The neighbors turned their eyes outward, searching highways, supermarkets, schools. The police built files inches thick on false leads. But nobody looked behind the wardrobe in the Lee living room. The irony was cruel. Every false clue, every rumor, every misplaced suspicion had dragged the community further from the truth. By the time a decade had passed, Ava Lee had become more ghost than girl, her name whispered only in passing, a tragedy folded into neighborhood folklore. And still, in that house on the corner with the peeling paint and the weary parents, the silence pressed on. Hope thinned to a thread, stretched so tight it could snap at any moment. The world outside believed Ava was gone. Inside, Anna clung to the impossible, walking each day past the door that concealed the secret. The thin wall, the hidden crawl space, the path that might have led her back to the daughter she had never stopped searching for. The neon buzzed above the roadside bar, bleeding pink and blue into the puddles along the parking lot. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and the scratch of guitars from the jukebox. Leather jackets and denim vests crowded the stools, a sea of patches and veteran insignia. Among them sat Evan Riker, his broad shoulders hunched over a bottle of cheap beer, tattoos catching the light as he gestured at a story. He had spent the afternoon at a biker rally, the kind of gathering where old war stories blended with the roar of engines. For Evan, 5 years in the Army, more years riding the open road, the gang was less about rebellion and more about family. Still, his temper was infamous. When another rider shoved past him at the bar, sloshing beer down his vest, Evan reacted the way he always did, hard and fast. A shove became a punch, and within seconds fists were flying, chairs scraping, voices rising into a brawl. The police stormed in before anyone could settle it. Neon red and blue lights stuttered across the walls as officers forced bodies apart. Evan was pinned against the counter, wrists yanked behind his back. He shouted curses, boots scuffing against the floor. But he didn't resist beyond that. He'd been in cuffs before. He knew the drill. By morning, every local paper had his mugshot on the front page. Man once linked to Ava Lee disappearance arrested in bar fight. The headline was enough. Old suspicions reignited like dry brush catching flame. Neighbors clipped the article, murmuring to one another over coffee. See? I always knew he was dangerous. The police, under pressure, went further. They obtained a warrant and marched straight to Evan's house. His garage smelled of motor oil and sweat. The floor littered with half-disassembled engines, socket wrenches, and beer cans. Posters of old Harley rallies plastered the walls. To investigators, it was the perfect backdrop for a criminal. They tore through drawers, pried open cabinets, raked through toolboxes looking for any trace of Ava Lee. But there was nothing. No photographs, no scraps of children's clothing, no DNA, no diary, only grease, dust, and the detritus of a solitary man. Meanwhile, at the Lee house, Anna sat frozen in front of the television as the newscaster repeated the arrest. Her chest tightened with a surge of something dangerously close to hope. Could it really be ending here? After 7 endless years of chasing false leads, could the nightmare finally collapse into justice? David paced the living room like a caged animal, muttering, "If it's him. If it was really him all this time." His fists clenched, as though he could already feel the man's throat in his grip. But then came the next broadcast. Police had found no evidence linking Evan Riker to Ava's disappearance. The charges were nothing more than disorderly conduct and assault from the bar fight. Hope shattered just as quickly as it had flared. Anna pressed her palms to her eyes, swallowing the sting of disappointment. She could feel the cycle repeating again. The rush. The collapse. The emptiness. David slammed his hand against the wall, cursing loudly. But even his anger couldn't mask the hollowness setting in. Across town, Evan was released with a bruised jaw and a permanent scowl. Reporters hounded him as he left the station. "Did you take Ava Lee? What were you hiding in that van?" His voice cracked as he bellowed back, "I didn't touch that kid. I never touched her." But the cameras had already decided the story. Violent veteran, biker, temper like gasoline. To the public, he was guilty in everything but law. To Anna and David, he was another dead end in a labyrinth of them. And to the audience, the message was clear. Every lead outside the Lie home, every suspicion hurled at Evan, was only a shadow cast by the real darkness hiding closer than anyone dared imagine. The old bedroom smelled faintly of dust and paper, a sweetness tinged with mildew that clung to the fabric of forgotten years. Anna stood in the doorway for a long time, unwilling to cross the threshold. Ava's room had become a museum she both feared and cherished, preserved as though time had stopped the night her daughter vanished. The faded curtains still hung with cartoon butterflies, their colors bleached by the sun. On the shelves, a row of picture books slumped together like tired children. A stuffed rabbit, one ear chewed, sat propped against the wall, its black button eyes dulled by dust. She forced herself forward, carrying a cardboard box to pack away clothes. 7 years had passed, and the small dresses still smelled of the detergent she used back then, sharp and ghostly when she pressed them to her face. Each garment she folded felt like a wound reopening. "Why am I doing this?" she whispered to the silence. Perhaps it was her husband's voice in her head, insisting it was time to sell, to move, to start again. Perhaps it was her own compulsion, a ritual of touching every scrap her daughter had left behind, refusing to let the memory fade. The wardrobe loomed against the far wall. It was a built-in piece, old wood painted ivory, its panels warped slightly with age. Anna pulled the doors wide, letting the stale air rush out. Inside, tiny hangers rattled as she slid aside coats and frilly dresses that no longer seemed real. She reached to lift a stack of folded shirts, and as she tugged, the fabric scraped against something rough. A thin tear ran down the lining at the back of the wardrobe, no bigger than her hand. She froze, her breath caught halfway in her throat. The cloth sagged outward, threads hanging loose, as though it had been sliced and stitched, then worn through again. She set the shirts aside and leaned in, pressing her fingers to the split. The fabric yielded with a faint crunch of dust, and underneath, metal. Her nails grazed the rounded head of a screw. It was dark with age, tinged orange from rust. She touched another an inch lower, and another. The back of the wardrobe wasn't seamless. It had been fixed into place, not built as part of the wall. Someone had put it there, tightened it down, and time had let the secret corrode. Anna's pulse thundered. She staggered back, staring at the tear as though it might widen on its own and reveal what lay beyond. Her rational mind whispered excuses. Maybe the builder cut corners. Maybe David had once repaired it. But deep inside, another voice pressed harder. This was altered. Someone tampered with it. Her knees bent without meaning to, and she crouched to the base of the wardrobe. There, along the floorboards, she saw a faint scuff. The wood bore a shallow groove, as if heavy weight had been dragged back and forth over years, and beside it, hardened to a glossy sheen, was a stain no larger than a coin. Pale pink, sugary, cracked at the edges. She reached out, rubbed it with her fingertip, then brought it to her nose. The faint sweetness of old candy clung there. Her vision swam. Ava had loved strawberry lollipops, the kind that stained her lips and left sticky prints on the furniture. Anna sat back hard against the bed, clutching the edge of the box, her chest rising and falling too fast. For years she had told herself the clues were elsewhere, out in the parks, on the streets, in Evan's van, in the hands of strangers. Every sign had led them outward. Now, for the first time, something pointed inward. Right here, inside these walls, the room seemed to shrink around her, its shadows gathering in the corners. She felt the weight of the house pressing down, the sense that she had been walking past this secret for more than half a decade. She stared at the tear in the wardrobe until her eyes burned, half terrified it might close itself up again and erase what she'd seen. "David," she whispered, though he was not there. Her hand trembled as she reached once more to touch the ragged cloth, feeling the cold promise of the screws behind it. For the first time in 7 years, suspicion shifted from the world outside to the home itself. And with it came a spark. Tiny, dangerous, undeniable, that the nightmare was not unsolvable. Somewhere, buried under rust and dust, was the truth. The house had fallen into the kind of silence that made Anna's skin prickle. Only the pendulum clock ticked steadily in the corner, each beat loud as a hammer in the stillness. Rain tapped faintly at the windows, and the occasional gust sent a shiver through the old frame of the Lie home. Anna stood in the small, dimly lit living room, her hand frozen against the back panel of the built-in wardrobe. She had been folding Ava's old dresses, the faded cotton crinkling between her fingers, when she noticed the cloth liner inside the back of the wardrobe, torn, fraying along a straight line. Behind it, something metallic glinted faintly, the rounded head of a rusted screw. "David," she called softly. The sound of his footsteps approached, heavy, reluctant. He stopped at the doorway, arms crossed. "What now?" His voice was tired, rough around the edges. She stepped aside, pointing. "Look, this isn't right. These screws, they don't belong to the wall." David leaned in, squinting under the lamp's warm glow. "It's an old wardrobe. Nails come loose. Panels crack. You're seeing ghosts, Anna." "No." Her voice sharpened. "It's different. Look at the way the wood's been pulled. This isn't wear. Someone opened this." His brow tightened. For years, their lives had orbited around empty clues, false leads, and fruitless searches. He was sick of it, sick of watching hope crumble. "You want every creak in this house to mean something," he muttered. Anna's gaze burned into him. "Then help me prove it doesn't." The weight of her insistence pinned him. With a reluctant sigh, David set his shoulder against the wardrobe. "Fine, but this thing hasn't moved in 20 years. Together they heaved. The wardrobe groaned against the floorboards, the scrape of wood on wood shrieking through the quiet house. Dust rose in clouds, carrying with it the smell of age, dry plaster, mothballs, and something else. Faint, metallic. David's hand slipped as the wardrobe resisted, as though it were part of the wall itself. "Again," Anna said, her voice shaking. Not with weakness, but determination. They strained once more, and the wardrobe shifted, inch by inch. A dark seam appeared where the panel had hugged the plaster. "Jesus," David whispered. He stepped back, chest heaving, sweat slicking his forehead. "There's a gap." Anna leaned close. The seam ran perfectly vertical, too clean for accident. Her heart hammered. Without speaking, she reached for the toolbox near the hallway, where David always left it after small repairs. From it, she pulled a flat bar, the cold iron steady in her trembling hands. "Anna, wait!" David caught her wrist. His eyes searched hers. "What if it's nothing? What if it's not?" She cut him off. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. She knelt, wedged the bar into the seam, and pressed. The wood moaned, nails resisting, until... crack. The panel shifted. Another push, harder. The board tore free, clattering against the wardrobe frame. Behind it was not drywall, not insulation, a square of fitted wood, and in its center, a small iron hasp, locked with a hook-and-eye clasp. David crouched, frowning. "That doesn't make sense. Who would—" Anna pressed a finger to the latch. The hook curved inward, fastened from the opposite side. Not to keep someone out, to keep someone in. Her stomach dropped. "It's locked from below." The two words hung between them like smoke. David's face hardened, the disbelief peeling away to reveal something closer to fear. He sat back on his heels, staring at the door in the floor they had never known existed. 15 years, he whispered. Anna touched the wood. It was cool beneath her palm, and faint drafts of air hissed up from the thin cracks around the edges. The scent was unmistakable now. Damp earth, mildew, the sharp ghost of bleach. Her chest tightened. She looked at David, her voice firm. "We have to open it." For a long moment he didn't move. Then, with a slow, reluctant nod, he reached for the crowbar. Together, they pried at the latch, the hook rattling against its plate. The silence of the house seemed to lean in, listening. Finally, with a metallic snap, the clasp broke free. A gust of cold air rushed upward, extinguishing the warmth of the room. It smelled of soil, of old wood, of something secret kept too long underground. David and Anna crouched over the opening, staring down into blackness. Anna's breath trembled, but her eyes held steady. "It's here," she whispered. "It's been here all along." The lid came free with a violent crack, the old wood splintering as David levered it up. A square of darkness yawned open beneath their living room floor. From it rose a chill, damp breath, as though the earth itself were exhaling. Anna recoiled, her hand flying to her mouth. For 15 years she had dreamed of doors opening, but never like this. David peered down, squinting. "God almighty!" Anna's flashlight trembled in her grip as she angled the beam into the hole. The light caught on a ladder. No, a staircase, wooden and steep, dropping into shadow. The steps looked worn, warped by moisture, and scattered across them was dust that had been disturbed. Her heart stopped when she saw the first mark, a pale print smudged across the lowest rung. She leaned closer, bringing the light steady. The outline of a palm. The little arc of fingers. A child's handprint. "David," she whispered. Her throat felt raw. "Look." He bent beside her, his jaw clenched tight. One print was low, almost level with the floor. Another appeared 2 steps higher. Then another, higher still. As the beam swept up, the truth emerged. A trail of handprints scaling the staircase, faint but undeniable, etched in dust and grime. "They're not all from one day," Anna said. Her voice was shaking. "They're years apart, you see. Lower when she was small, then taller and taller." The words hung in the cold air. David rubbed a hand down his face, torn between hope and horror. He wanted to argue, to dismiss it as coincidence, but the logic was merciless. These marks didn't belong to intruders. They belonged to a child who had grown older here. 1 year at a time. Anna touched the dried streak on the step, an old candy smear hardened into amber. Tears stung her eyes. "It's hers, it has to be," David cursed under his breath. then swung his legs into the opening. The wood groaned, but held his weight. "Stay behind me," he said. Anna followed. The beam shook across the narrow steps, brushing the walls that closed tighter the deeper they went. Their breaths echoed, white against the damp chill. At the bottom, the passage opened into a low, narrow corridor. They could barely crouch. The ceiling hung so close it forced their spines into a painful bend. Anna swept the flashlight forward, revealing walls padded with old felt or carpet lining. The texture sagged in damp strips, but it muffled every sound. "Soundproofing," David muttered, his voice hollow. "So no one outside would hear." The thought made Anna's stomach turn. They shuffled deeper. Dust coated their palms when they steadied themselves on the walls. Then David's shoulder brushed something taut. He flinched and grabbed it. A thin rope, or rather, a wire, rigged along the wall, threaded toward the far end of the tunnel. He tugged gently. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, a faint metallic jingle answered. A bell, he realized. She rigged a goddamn bell down here, to know if anyone moved through it. Anna's face drained of color. So she could control it. She knew every step. They pressed on, the tunnel squeezing them like a throat. After several yards, the beam of light landed on a recess cut into the wall. Something glinted there, a small tin box, wedged into the cavity. Anna pulled it out with trembling hands. She flipped the lid, and Polaroid spilled into her lap. Her breath hitched. The pictures showed a girl, 6 years old, then 7, then 8, hair hacked shorter than Ava's used to be, but her face was unmistakable. She was sitting cross-legged on a thin mattress, clutching books, her smile subdued and uncertain. "No." Anna's knees gave way. She pressed the photos to her chest as though they might dissolve. David knelt beside her, his mouth working soundlessly. Each photograph was a year stolen, a year lived in silence beneath their feet. Anna lifted the last one. Ava at 9, thinner, older, eyes dulled. Her stomach lurched. She dropped the photo back into the box and saw what lay beneath, a leather-bound notebook. Her hands shook as she opened it. The writing was jagged, almost feverish. Care for a child as though she were mine, as though loss had never taken her. Protect her from the world that forgets to watch. Anna's vision blurred. The words weren't signed, but she knew the hand. She'd seen Marjorie's cursive on birthday cards, on grocery notes stuck to her door. David's fist closed around the edge of the box. "She's been right here. She watched us search, watched us grieve, while she was—" His voice broke. Rage flooded his face. "That woman! That goddamn woman!" Anna gripped his arm. "Keep going. We're not stopping now." The tunnel stretched ahead, then forked. Anna shone the beam left. It curved toward their own crawl space, the path returning to the lie house. She turned it right. The passage led further, vanishing into darkness. "Where does it end?" she whispered. They followed the right branch. After another 20 feet, their light struck a wall of planks arranged as a sliding door. The wood was freshly painted, too clean compared to the rot around it. And there, at chest height, sat a steel latch. David rattled it, swore under his breath. The bar slid into place from the opposite side. Locked. "Only opens from her side," he said bitterly. Anna pressed her forehead against the wood, her pulse hammering. Just beyond this barrier was the basement of Marjorie's house. She could almost feel the warmth of it seeping through. She whispered into the gap, though she knew no one was listening. "Ava. Baby, are you there?" No answer. Only silence, thick and smothered by the padded walls. Anna pulled back, her body shaking, but the Polaroids burned in her hand like proof, undeniable and cruel. Their daughter had grown up in this passage. She was alive long after they had buried hope. And now, Anna's gaze hardened, she was only a wall away. The latch gave way with a reluctant groan as David shoved the door aside. Beyond the narrow crawl, the air shifted, cleaner, warmer, tinged with the faintest trace of lavender. They had crossed the threshold into another home. Marjorie's basement. Anna ducked through first, her flashlight cutting across the gloom. The beam revealed a space startlingly unlike the cramped, dust-choked crawlspace behind them. This basement was immaculate. A runner rug stretched across the floor, patterned with faded daisies. On one wall, a row of small dresses hung from wooden hangers, organized by size as though on display in a boutique. Opposite, shelves were lined with children's books: The Velveteen Rabbit, Goodnight Moon, a stack of Nancy Drew mysteries with worn spines, all arranged in ascending order as if someone had carefully curated a private library for a child's growing years. Anna pressed a hand to her mouth. My God. David's jaw tightened. He reached out, touching the hem of one of the dresses. It was freshly laundered, the fabric still holding a faint crispness. This isn't storage, he muttered. It's a room, kept alive. They moved deeper. A small table was set in the corner, bright plastic bowls stacked neatly on top. A doll with a missing shoe sat propped in a chair, as if waiting for its owner to return. The basement radiated a perverse domesticity, a shadow version of the home above them. Only here, everything had been frozen in time, as though childhood itself had been arrested and preserved under glass. Anna's flashlight trembled in her grip. Her mind clawed at the pieces. 15 years of sleepless nights, of unanswered questions, of faces on flyers fading under the rain. And now this, evidence that her daughter had lived, had been kept, had been reshaped. She steadied her breath and whispered, She's here. She has to be. From the far side of the basement, a stairway rose into darkness. The door at the top was closed, but a thin line of yellow light leaked through the crack at the bottom. David shot Anna a look. She nodded. Together they ascended, each creak of the step threatening to betray them. At the top, David pressed his ear against the door. Silence. He turned the knob. To their surprise, it wasn't locked. The door swung inward with a faint squeal. They entered the main floor of Marjorie's house. The contrast was jarring. Where the basement had been carefully curated for a child, the house itself bore the tidy sterility of an elderly widow's dwelling. Doilies rested on armrests. Framed family photos lined the mantel, but none featured children. The air smelled faintly of chamomile tea and furniture polish. They crept down the hallway. At the end, a door stood ajar. Anna's heart hammered against her ribs. She touched David's arm, drew in a breath, and pushed the door open. Inside was a small bedroom. The curtains were drawn, muting the late afternoon light into a soft haze. A young woman sat on the edge of the bed, her posture stiff, her frame thin but upright. She was leafing through a book with slow, deliberate movements. Her hair fell in loose strands around her face, shorter than Anna remembered, but the shape of her jaw, the curve of her brow, those were Ava's. Anna's knees nearly buckled. She dropped the flashlight, stumbling forward. Ava, she breathed, voice cracking. Oh, my baby. The girl turned sharply. Her eyes were wide, wary, more animal than human. She held the book like a shield. Who are you? She asked, her voice trembling yet strangely practiced, as though repeating a lesson. Anna froze. The word who struck like a blade. It's me, she whispered desperately. It's Mama. Don't you know me? The girl's lips parted, but the sound that came out wasn't what Anna expected. My name is May. Her words were slow, careful, as though correcting someone. Mother told me never to talk to strangers. David stood in the doorway, his chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. He looked at Anna, then at the girl. His voice, usually booming, emerged as a cracked whisper. Ava, it's your dad. The girl blinked, confused. She shrank back onto the bed, shaking her head. Mom will be home soon, she said. Please, don't make her afraid. Anna clutched at her chest, torn between the urge to rush forward and the terror of scaring her daughter further away. Tears blurred her vision. Sweetheart, We've been looking for you for 15 years. We never stopped. But the girl interrupted, her voice rising with distress. You can't be here. Mother said people would lie to me. Mother keeps me safe. The word mother hung between them like a verdict. Not Anna. Not the woman who had given birth to her, who had tucked her in, who had watched her vanish in the space of 90 seconds. No. The only mother this young woman recognized was Marjorie. David's fists clenched helplessly at his sides. His instinct to storm forward warred with the knowledge that force would only fracture this fragile moment. He swallowed hard, his voice low and shaking. She doesn't even know who we are. Anna edged closer, her palms open, pleading. May, Ava, look at me. Please, look at my face. Do you remember the yellow duck blanket? The one you never slept without? You lost it once, and we searched the whole park until we found it under the slide. The girl's brow furrowed. For a fleeting instant, her expression wavered, something like recognition glimmering in her eyes. But then it was gone, smothered by a rigid fear. She shook her head violently. Mother said memories can be tricks. Anna's breath broke into sobs. She reached toward her daughter, but the girl flinched back. Please, she whispered, don't hurt me. Mother will be so mad. The sound of that name again, Mother, curled in Anna's gut like venom. She felt David's hand on her arm, steadying her. He leaned close, his voice barely audible. We found her. That's what matters. We found her. We'll bring her home, Anna, no matter what it takes. Anna nodded weakly, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her gaze stayed locked on the fragile figure before her, the child she had lost, now grown into a stranger. Her own blood yet unreachable, and beneath the grief, beneath the fury, a terrible clarity struck her. For Ava, the word mother belonged to someone else now. The house smelled faintly of lavender and wood polish, too neat, too staged, as if every item had been deliberately placed to convey calm. Anna stood in the center of the living room, her arms wrapped around herself. David lingered near the hallway, phone clenched in his hand, the call screen ready, but not yet pressed. Upstairs, May's footsteps paced nervously, her voice a whisper repeating, She'll be home soon, don't make her angry. Then the sound came, the metallic jangle of keys against the door. Anna froze. David's hand shot out to her, steadying her arm. The door swung open with a quiet creak, and there was Marjorie, her silhouette backlit by the fading glow of the setting sun. A paper grocery bag hung from one arm, and in the other hand she carried a slim white pharmacy sack. Her expression was one of casual normalcy, as if she had stepped in from a routine errand. May? She called lightly, her voice bright, almost sing-song. Mommy's back. I've got your medicine. Let's take it before dinner. She set the grocery bag on the counter, humming to herself as she slipped off her coat. Then she turned, expecting her obedient daughter to emerge from the hallway. Instead, Anna stepped forward. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. Marjorie blinked, her smile faltering, her breath catching in her throat. Then she laughed, a brittle, stalling sound. Oh, she said. Anna. What a surprise. You're in my house. Her eyes darted quickly from Anna to David, reading their stance, reading the rage on Anna's face. How did you get in? Anna's voice came like a blade. Where is my daughter? Marjorie's face twitched, the mask of neighborly warmth trembling. She set the pharmacy bag down with careful precision, as though buying herself time. Your daughter? Anna, you're mistaken. May is my child. Ava. Ava disappeared years ago. David thumbed his phone, whispering into it. 911, his voice low but urgent. Marjorie's gaze snapped to him. There's no need for that, she said sharply, the first crack in her tone. We can discuss this calmly. Anna advanced, fists trembling, 15 years, you dug a hole through our house, through our lives. You stole her. Marjorie shook her head, feigning confusion. You don't understand. You've been grieving too long, seeing ghosts where there aren't any. May isn't Ava. She's mine. She calls you mother. Anna spat. Because you forced her to. For a flicker of a second, something hard and cold surfaced in Marjorie's eyes. Then she sighed, lowering herself into a chair, as though exhausted by the charade. I kept her safe, she murmured, almost to herself. Safe from people who can't keep their eyes on a child for 90 seconds. The word struck Anna like a lash. Her chest heaved and David's head snapped up from his phone call, eyes narrowing. 90 seconds, the exact span of time Anna had turned away in the kitchen. Marjorie realized her mistake instantly. She pressed her lips together, then tried to cover it. I meant, you can't blame yourself. Children disappear in the blink of an eye. It happens. I gave her a home. You stole her childhood, Anna hissed. The room vibrated with tension. May crept into the doorway, wide-eyed, clutching the banister, whispering, Mom? Her voice trembled with confusion, unsure which woman she meant. Marjorie's face softened instantly at the sight of her, arms outstretched. Come here, sweetheart. Don't listen to them. They're upset. They'll leave soon. Anna took a step forward, blocking her path. No, she's my daughter, and you knew it all along. Marjorie's expression warped again, shifting from syrupy affection to something brittle, cornered. Her hands curled into fists against her knees. You wouldn't understand, she snapped. I lost my little girl. I lost her, and I wasn't going to let the world take another from me. Not again. Her voice cracked on the last word, the confession slipping free before she could pull it back. The living room, once staged to look serene, now felt suffocating. Walls closing in on the truth. David's voice cut through, calm but edged with steel. The police are on their way. For the first time, Marjorie's composure broke fully, her face contorted, half pleading, half defiant. You don't know what it's like to wake up every day to silence where a child's laughter used to be. Anna, shaking, reached back for May's hand. The girl hesitated, torn between the two women, her gaze darting wildly. And in that taut moment, the illusion of neighborly kindness shattered forever. The air in Marjorie's living room felt poisonous, thick, suffocating. Anna clutched Ava, dragging her toward the front door, but the knob refused to give. The deadbolt was jammed tight. Panic prickled across Anna's skin like fire ants. Come on, sweetheart, she begged, pulling harder. We're leaving. We're going home. But Ava, May, dug in her heels, her thin body stiff with terror. Don't make Mom mad, she whispered, her voice almost breaking. Anna's heart split clean down the middle. To her daughter, she was the intruder, and Marjorie, the woman who had stolen her, was still mother. Behind them, a crash. The grocery bag hitting the floor, jars splitting, oranges rolling wild. And then the sound of something primal. A scream, high and raw, no longer a neighborly voice, but an animal's howl. Marjorie was upon them. Her face contorted, lips peeled back to bare her teeth. Spit flew as she shrieked, You think you can take her? She's mine! I gave her everything! You lost her in 90 seconds! You don't deserve her back! She launched at David with the fury of something inhuman, nails raking down his arm, fists pounding like claws. David caught her wrists, muscles straining, but she writhed with a strength that made no sense for a 65-year-old widow. Her gray curls had come loose, hair hanging wild, eyes flashing with madness. Anna had never seen a person look less human. Run, Anna! David bellowed through clenched teeth, forcing Marjorie against the wall, but she twisted, bit at his shoulder, howled in his ear. The veins in his neck bulged as he tried to pin her, every tendon in his body stretched to breaking. Still, she fought like a beast cornered. Anna tugged Ava toward the door, but the girl kicked and screamed, arms flailing. Let go! Don't hurt Mom! She clawed at Anna's sleeves, her panic sharp as glass. "No, baby, please, it's me, it's Mama," Anna sobbed. But Ava wrenched away, staggering back toward Marjorie even as David wrestled to keep the older woman pinned. The room became a storm. Glass shattering, furniture overturning, Marjorie shrieking like something dragged from the pit. "She's mine, mine forever. If I can't keep her, no one will." She tore free one hand, grabbing for the deadbolt to slam the door, to lock them all inside. David barely caught her, slamming her arm back. A side table toppled, books and frames scattering, a lamp bursting in sparks. Anna dragged Ava again, but the girl was too strong in her frenzy, too desperate to run back to the woman she thought was Mother. Anna felt herself losing, muscles trembling, grief and rage crashing like waves. And then, a sound from outside, cutting through everything. The low, guttural roar of a Harley. The engine thundered as it tore up the cul-de-sac, rattling the windows. The house seemed to hold its breath. Then impact. The front door exploded inward in a spray of splinters. The deadbolt ripped from the frame. And there he was, Evan Riker, filling the doorway like a storm-given flesh, chest heaving, fists already curled. He took it in with a single sweep. Anna on the floor, grappling with Ava. David straining against a woman transformed into a monster. Her hair wild, her nails dripping blood from fresh scratches. Marjorie spun, eyes blazing, shrieking like a banshee. "Get out! She's mine!" She lunged at him, clawed hands outstretched. Evan didn't hesitate. He caught her mid-charge, arms wrapping around her body like iron bands. She thrashed, screamed, kicked, bit, her voice breaking into guttural howls that no longer sounded like words. But Evan's strength was a wall. He clamped down, twisting her arms behind her, pinning her chest to his side. She writhed like a hooked animal, but she was caught. "Enough!" he roared, his voice rattling the picture frames still left on the walls. The chaos seemed to collapse into silence. Only the sound of Evan's breath, ragged and furious, Marjorie's shrieks muffled against his grip, Anna's sobs as she held her daughter tight. For 15 years, Evan had been the shadow everyone feared. The man with the van, the biker with the temper. And now, in one breathless moment, he was the one who had saved them. David staggered upright, face slick with blood, chest rising and falling in thunderclaps. His eyes locked with Evan's. For a second, the weight of years, suspicion, whispers, blame, hung between them. Then David nodded, short and guttural, a thank you that carried the weight of everything he could not yet say. Evan returned it with a grim nod, holding Marjorie fast as she spat and screamed, her face twisted beyond recognition, all trace of the sweet widow burned away. Anna clutched Ava, rocking her even as the girl whimpered, still confused, still calling out, "Mom! Mom!" Her tears fell hot on Ava's hair. "It's me, baby. It's Mama. You're safe. You're safe now." And somewhere beyond, sirens began to wail, drawing closer. For 15 years, the world had been upside down. Marjorie the good neighbor, Evan the threat. And now, in this wrecked living room, the truth stood naked. The real monster was caught in Evan's arms, and the family she tried to steal was breaking free. The night air outside Marjorie's house pulsed with the throb of red and blue. Patrol cars and an ambulance crowded the cul-de-sac, their lights washing the perfect white fences and manicured lawns in a lurid carnival glow. Neighbors stood in stunned knots at the edges of their driveways, clutching coats against the chill, whispering as officers strung yellow tape around the house they had long considered the most welcoming on the block. Anna sat on the bumper of an ambulance, her arm wrapped around Ava, May, as the girl still called herself, who shook silently, eyes wide and distant. A paramedic offered blankets and water. David stood close, one hand braced against the ambulance door, his gaze fixed on the basement window of Marjorie's house, as if staring long enough might erase what had been hidden there for 15 years. 2 officers emerged carrying evidence bags, a stack of Polaroids, the worn leather journal, receipts yellowed with age. Another held photographs of the tunnel itself. Rough-hewn walls, the napping of sound-deadening felt, the narrow wooden stair where small hands had left their ghosts. "Built right under their noses," one detective muttered, shaking his head. "Started in the lie house, lock facing inward. No way that girl could have come out on her own." Marjorie herself was led out in handcuffs. Her scarf had slipped askew, revealing gray hair matted with sweat. She muttered under her breath as she shuffled to the cruiser, half pleading, half accusing. "I only kept her safe. Safer than they ever could." 90 seconds. That's all it took for them to lose her. 90 seconds. Anna buried her face in Ava's hair, shivering at the words. Later, in the fluorescent chill of an interrogation room at the Franklin County Jail, Marjorie finally spoke in full sentences. The tape recorder whirred as detectives leaned in. "I told the contractors it was a foundation problem," she said flatly. "Had them pour extra cement. I finished it myself. The boards, the felt. I bought them at Home Depot. Receipts are in the drawer. Check the dates. Summer, fall of 2005. "And the lock, facing inward?" a detective pressed. "I couldn't risk her wandering. The world is cruel. You don't know what it's like to lose a child." Her voice cracked, then sharpened. "I lost my granddaughter in a fire. She burned before I could reach her. I was given another chance, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away. May was mine to raise, mine to protect." The detectives exchanged a look. In the quiet of the room, the fantasy and the crime bled together, impossible to separate. The trial was swift, the evidence overwhelming. Polaroids documenting Ava's growth from 5 to 20, each birthday stolen. The journal repeating the same mantra: to raise again what was lost. Receipts dated precisely to the months after Ava vanished. And the tunnel, a scar carved beneath 2 houses. Undeniable. Marjorie Bennett, 65, was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and aggravated child endangerment. Local newspapers called it the Hollow Neighbor case. For weeks, headlines blared, "Perfect suburb hides a dungeon." Meanwhile, the Lee family tried to reclaim pieces of a life that had been buried. At Nationwide Children's Hospital, Ava submitted to tests, doctors noting malnutrition, gaps in memory, the trauma etched in posture and tone. She recoiled from Anna's touch at first, clinging instead to the memory of Mother Marjorie. But Anna stayed patient, sitting by her bedside, humming old Mandarin lullabies, sliding drawings of flowers and houses across the table without asking for recognition. David paced the hallways, shoulders hunched with years of grief hardened into armor. Yet one evening, as he stepped outside the hospital to breathe, he saw the glint of chrome under a streetlight. Evan Riker leaned against his Harley, cigarette burning down between his fingers. For a long moment neither spoke. Then David crossed the pavement and extended his hand. "I owe you my family's life." Evan ground out the cigarette and clasped David's hand with rough strength. His voice was low, stripped of bravado. "About damn time somebody believed me." For the first time in years, David didn't see a suspect, but a man who had carried his own exile in silence. Weeks later, the Lees returned to their home. The built-in wardrobe was gone, the wall patched but still raw. Anna stood in the living room, staring at that patch of plaster, seeing both the void it had concealed and the years it had stolen. Ava padded into the room, wrapped in a blanket, eyes tracing the same wall. She said nothing, but she let her mother's hand rest gently over hers. Outside, the cul-de-sac was silent, the lawns as neatly trimmed as ever. To any passerby, the neighborhood looked safe again, ordinary again. But for those who had lived it, the illusion was gone forever. Anna whispered, not to Ava, not to David, but to herself. It was always right here, behind the wall. The weight of it settled and lifted at once. An ending and the fragile beginning of whatever came next. 15 years of silence, of blind alleys and false suspects, ended in the most unthinkable way, behind a wall in the very house Anna and David had called home. What looked like the safest street in Upper Arlington had hidden a nightmare just below its foundations. A mother's persistence uncovered what investigators, neighbors, and even time itself had buried. And in that discovery, the illusion of safety was shattered. But stories like this aren't just about crime or punishment. They're about resilience, about the strength it takes to keep believing when everyone else has given up, and about the unsettling truth that sometimes evil wears the most familiar face. Now, we'd love to hear from you. What struck you most about Anna and David's journey? About Marjorie's twisted obsession? Do you think Ava, May, can ever rebuild her life after years of stolen identity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one of them, and your voice matters in keeping these stories alive. If this story gripped you, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to LightUp Stories. Your support gives us the fuel to bring you more haunting, unforgettable tales.